Unclear. COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
The World Health Organization makes it official. COVID-19 is a pandemic, and it comes as health officials in Ontario confirm 4 new cases. The WHO says it's the first pandemic ever caused by a coronavirus, and they decided it was time to sound the alarm after seeing cases spread to new countries and the lack of action on the part of some governments. But their underlying message, COVID-19 can be controlled.
More than 90% of cases are in just 4 countries, and 2 of those, China and the Republic of Korea, have significantly declining epidemics. We cannot say this loudly enough, or clearly enough, or often enough. All countries can still change the course of this pandemic.
Here in Ontario, there are now 42 cases of COVID-19. Let's go live to Lisa Shing at the Metro Toronto Convention Centre. Lisa, we've learned that one of the latest cases is a man who was there last week for a big conference. Tell us about it.
Right, Chris, that person attended a huge international mining conference here at the convention center. Now, officials say that the risk is still low to the community, so not to panic.
The individual attended the PDAC conference.
One of the province's newest cases of COVID-19 involves a man who works here at the Ministry of Northern Development and Mines building in Sudbury. He went to an international mining conference in Toronto last week, attended by tens of thousands of people around the world.
We are not aware that the individual was in contact with a known confirmed case. So these are worrisome. These are of concern.
Officials suspect he contracted the virus at the conference, then returned to Sudbury to work for a couple of days before experiencing symptoms. Because some Laurentian University classes take place in the ministry building, the school has cancelled all classes, moving them online. Now, in a memo obtained by CBC, the province says it's only approving business critical out-of-province or international travel.
We all know that they're a particularly vulnerable group of patients.
And a second case, an oncologist at Hamilton Health Sciences Juravinsky Center who returned from a personal trip to Hawaii has tested positive. The doctor was in contact with staff and 14 cancer patients.
We are very pleased with the precautions that were taken yesterday by the individual who was involved. They were very responsible in their actions, presenting quickly for assessment as soon as they became symptomatic.
Both patients are in self-isolation. Today, Toronto's medical officer of health emphasized people who were at the conference in Toronto or those who attend large gatherings generally shouldn't see a doctor unless they have symptoms.
Brief interactions, including walking by a person who may be infected with COVID-19 or briefly being in the same room with that person, these kinds of situations are considered to be low risk.
This isn't the time for politics. It's a time that we stick together.
There still isn't any local transmission in Ontario. That's when someone contracts the virus without being able to identify the source. In case the situation worsens, the province has set aside $100 million for supplies and is assuring people it has a plan.
One hospital in particular may be the one that will receive the patients who have COVID-19, allowing the other hospitals to take up the work that was normally done by the hospital that's now going to deal with COVID-19.
And Chris, I should also mention that Premier Doug Ford as well as Prime Minister Justin Trudeau were at that mining conference and made appearances. They both are fine as well. As for what the province plans to do, we'll get a little more detail about the assessment centers it plans to open in the coming days. They will be located away from hospitals, but not exactly a lot of details on which hospitals would be involved in that effort Christine Elliott was talking about.
Okay, so some new assessment areas and assessment centers, but with the WHO declaring this a pandemic, does it change anything else for Ontario?
Well, the Ontario officials said that they weren't surprised, that it was just a matter of time for the WHO to declare this pandemic. Essentially what it means is that it confirms that it's a global spread and that the spread is increasing, but it doesn't change protocols.
Okay, well, thanks for this tonight, Lisa. And speaking of protocols, new protocols are coming for long-term care homes in the province during this outbreak of COVID-19. Those include active screening of staff, visitors, and residents at care homes. They'll be proactively checked for symptoms and asked about recent travel history and contacts. Also, now when care homes submit samples for standard respiratory testing, they'll be automatically tested for COVID-19. This is to help find potentially unknown cases. Next to Ottawa's response, and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau today announcing his billion-dollar plan to address the COVID-19 pandemic. It includes money for the provinces and territories and for the healthcare system itself, along with help for businesses and people to get them through the crisis. Julie Van Dusen has more.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has been hinting at this aid package for several days. He arrived at the news conference flanked by key cabinet ministers and Theresa Tam, the head of Canada's Public Health Agency.
I know that people are worried about what they're seeing on the nightly news and what it means for their community. We get it, and we're on it.
The Trudeau government is putting $1 billion into fighting this pandemic immediately. $500 million of that to support provinces and territories for measures including testing and equipment. $275 million for antiviral and vaccine development. That's on top of $27 million just announced. $50 million for personal protective equipment, including surgical masks and isolation gowns. And the rest goes towards Canada's public health response, Indigenous services, and help for workers and businesses. Those workers who must be quarantined will be able to tap into EI benefits right away. The government is waiving the 1-week waiting period. The government says it will explore how to support workers who aren't eligible for EI. Businesses, including the airline industry, are getting hammered. Tourism is taking a hit too, as the disease ripples through the economy.
But we stand prepared with multiple measures in order to support businesses and to support people should the challenge be greater than it is today.
It's clear fighting the pandemic will be costly. The Conservatives say finances are already stretched thanks to Liberal spending.
We go into this crisis with a $27 billion deficit and an economy that had already ground to a halt.
The government says today's announcement could be just the beginning, with forecasts indicating that 30 to 70% of Canadians may become infected with COVID-19. Julie Van Dusen, CBC News, Ottawa.
Now to the stock markets, and another disastrous day. Both the TSX and the Dow entered what's called a bear market. That's a 20% or more decline over a 2-month period. The TSX down 688 points. The Dow dropped more than 1,400 points, and the price of oil down $1.38 to just under $33 a barrel. A silver lining in all this, gas prices. The price at the pumps in Toronto had their biggest drop in years overnight. Aaron Saltzman now with how the steep decline isn't just due to coronavirus and the consequences all this could have on Canada's economy.
The only thing more remarkable than the price drop at the pumps,
I don't think it's been this cheap since high school,
was driver reaction. Considering the savings, it was almost subdued.
So it's good for a change. It's a little worrisome.
I think it's great. I'm not terribly certain how it's going to do for our economy in the long run.
In the long run, it's not good.
Oil has always been a boom-bust commodity. Normally, when prices drop, demand goes up. But this time, because of coronavirus, airlines aren't flying, ships aren't sailing, large parts of the planet aren't spending, and that is throwing the entire supply-demand cycle into disarray.
You have whole countries, economies shutting in and reducing their economic activity, so real fall in demand. But you also have this really elevated sense of anxiety, uncertainty, and no one my guess is as good as anyone else's in terms of how long that's going to persist.
Energy accounts for more than 11% of Canada's economy. Now energy companies, which had already been shedding jobs before this crisis, will be cutting costs even more, canceling projects, reducing investment. Alberta, its unemployment rate already higher than the Canadian average, will be hammered once again.
We're looking at about a $5 to $6 billion hit to government finances.
Newfoundland and Labrador, on weaker economic footing than Alberta, will also be hit hard, as will Saskatchewan, as will the Canadian dollar. So while the drop at the pumps will mean lower costs for now, in the long run there will likely be a much higher price to pay. Aaron Saltzman, CBC News, Toronto.
Still ahead, we'll take you to New York State, where a small town has become a containment zone after more than 100 cases of COVID-19. Plus, how is Toronto protecting some of its most vulnerable, the homeless? We'll have those stories for you at 6:30. And remember, for the latest anytime on the coronavirus, head to cbcnews.ca. Now to the other major story of the day. Harvey Weinstein was sentenced to 23 years in prison. The former movie producer's severe sentence follows his conviction last month on charges of rape and sexual assault. The penalty is being touted as a victory for the Me Too movement, but it's raising eyebrows in legal circles as well. Zuleka Nathu has the story.
She didn't speak, but Jessica Mann showed a sign of victory. Mann was one of the 2 women accusing Weinstein of sexual offenses in the trial.
The judge sent a message today that this type of behavior is something that any potential offender is going to have to consider.
Weinstein's defense team says they will appeal, calling the 23-year sentence too harsh.
That number was obnoxious. There are murderers who will get out of court faster than Harvey Weinstein will. That number spoke to the pressure of movements and the public. That number did not speak to the evidence that came out at trial.
More than 90 women have accused Weinstein of misconduct. Many view the case as a landmark decision for the Me Too movement. In a statement, the Time's Up organization said the social change catalyzed by these survivors has been nothing short of transformational. Weinstein's legal battles are far from over. He still faces charges in Los Angeles linked to 2 incidents in 2013, including rape. Prosecutors say they've begun the extradition process to bring Weinstein back to LA. Lawyer Gloria Allred represents one of the women behind the Los Angeles case and one of the accusers in the New York trial.
Now there are consequences to be remembered, and more potential consequences for Mr. Weinstein in the future.
For now, Weinstein is in the custody of Correctional Services. They'll determine where the disgraced Hollywood producer will serve his sentence. Zuleka Nathu, CBC News, Los Angeles.
It was the biggest shock of my life. If it can happen to me, it may happen to you.
Watch as this man slowly but ultimately successfully steals another man's backpack at Toronto's Chick-fil-A. Inside, crucial documents he had on hand for a recent citizenship application. His story is coming up after a quick look at your weather. I want to bring in Suzanne Leonard now. And Suzanne, we've been talking about this cool down for days. How cool is it going to get?
How tough are you, Chris?
I'm pretty tough. Bring it.
Good. Glad to hear it. Let's bring it on, shall we? Current temperatures, we're sitting just above the 0 mark. We were seasonal today, which for the greater Toronto area is about 3 degrees at this time of year. So no complaining there. Easterly winds, though, so a little cooler by the water, as is typical. Wind will be a big story. Chris and everyone joining us in the short range forecast. I'll get to that in just a second. A couple of flakes here and there to the north and east of the GTA through the afternoon, but overall it's been fairly quiet. A little bit gray, overcast conditions after some morning sunshine. As we pull back, we see some energy up around Georgian Bay. And in fact, there is a fairly significant low coming for parts of the north again in the short range forecast. How that will be affecting us, well, let's talk about what's ahead. Thursday morning, the drive period. Quiet, dry, always good when you've got dry roads for your morning commute. So there shouldn't be any weather-related travel delays. We'll be milder tomorrow. We'll be above average for temperatures. Some increasing cloud late day. Couple of showers down towards the southwest. Passing showers for us in the overnight hours. But the significant thing about this next low, most of its energy is in the north, as I mentioned. It's the wind, and it's going to end up being a very windy late overnight tomorrow into Friday. We'll be talking about that a little later in the program. -1 this evening if you're heading out like northeasterlies. -3 overnight. That's a bit above average for this time of year. A little bit above average for a daytime high, Chris, for tomorrow.
Honestly, this isn't that bad for March.
Not so bad.
Thanks, Suzanne.
Thanks.
The weather update is brought to you by Train, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. It's hard to stop a train.
The union representing elementary teachers has resumed contract talks with the Ontario government. Despite that, some teachers were picketing outside of their schools today. The Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario says if bargaining doesn't produce an agreement, it will resume job action after March break. Contract talks with the unions representing English Catholic teachers and French language teachers are also continuing. Now to a Mississauga man who is sounding the alarm about a brazen theft at a busy fast food restaurant. In that moment, he lost almost every piece of identification he had, including 2 passports. Farah Morelli shares his story.
These are the moments right before Balaji Devata Venkatesh was robbed.
I didn't even realize that this person's pulling this backpack.
Venkatesh was here at Chick-fil-A on Friday night when it all happened. He's seen in this security video at a countertop, his back to the camera, eating with a friend, his black backpack on the ground to his right. In the 8-minute-long tape, this man, seen walking in front of the gray pillar, circles Venkatesh's table. He stands near him at several points while talking on his phone. At least twice, he subtly pulls Venkatesh's backpack away from the table with his foot. And a few minutes later, he picks it up and walks right out the door.
It was the biggest shock of my life because it never happened to me.
What was actually in that backpack made a bad situation worse. Venkatesh's laptop, SIM card, and a slew of crucial documents he had on hand for a recent citizenship application.
I lost my passport, both Indian passport and Canadian passport, and I lost my citizenship certificate, and I lost my landing papers. Basically everything that are needed to apply for these documents, I lost them as well.
The people committing these crimes are looking for a victim of opportunity.
Toronto police confirmed they are investigating, but say this type of theft happens daily.
So whenever these types of items are lost or stolen, a police report needs to be put on file in order to retrieve these belongings, which is why it's always recommended never ever carry those personal original documents with you at all times unless you need it.
Without ID or passports, Venkatesh says he's unable to travel right now. His message to others, be vigilant of what you carry and how you carry it.
If it can happen to me, it may happen to you.
Farah Morelli, CBC News, Toronto.
Caminado is one step closer to becoming a permanent car-sharing service in Toronto, coming up the hurdles they and any future competitors still have to face.
A car-sharing pilot program got the green light from the city's Infrastructure and Environment Committee today. The 18-month pilot allowed one car-sharing service to park in residential permit parking areas. Taylor Simmons has the story.
It's simple to use. Open the app to find and unlock your ride, grab your keys, and buckle up. What's not so simple, deciding where these vehicles can park. Some services like Zipcar have their own designated spots. Others use permit parking areas, accessing more people, but causing frustration for residents. The city launched a pilot with Communauto in 2018, looking at regulations to address the concerns.
Many families live this way.
According to Councillor Mike Layton, who uses Communauto, it was a success.
I think it was a positive move forward. It's convenient and less expensive than owning a car just to take trips to the grocery store or to IKEA.
City staff analyzed Communauto data showing complaints have gone down. They also found a number of people using the service gave up their own personal parking permits.
Streets that are 100% permitted still won't have these vehicles ending their trips on their street. It's only in areas that have capacity.
Communauto has nearly 200 cars on the road right now, and if all continues to go well, they hope to add another 100 by the spring. The Infrastructure and Environment Committee agreed the program should become permanent, adding limits on how long and how many vehicles can park in any one area. The recommended cost for a vehicle permit, almost $1,600.
The permit cost is linked to the cost of a permit that would go to a single, like a family or an individual who lived in a neighborhood that qualified for a permit.
It's the most expensive in Canada, far higher than other cities. We will see in the future if it's really a reasonable pricing or it's really impossible to operate with this.
City Council will have the final say on the pilot's future at a meeting on April 1st. Taylor Simmons, CBC News, Toronto.
On the amendment, all those in favor?
One person is dead after a fire broke out at this Toronto community housing building in Parkdale today. It happened around 9:30 this morning on Dunn near Queen. After crews put out the fire, a person was found inside the unit and was pronounced dead at the scene. But it's not yet known if the death is connected to the fire. Toronto police want help identifying suspects after two people broke in and set fire to a police collision reporting center last week. I want to show you the damage. This is it that was left behind last Wednesday. Tonight, police are releasing security camera images of the suspects. They say two males were dropped off at the East Collision Reporting Center in Scarborough around 12:45 a.m. The two forced their way into the building, poured an accelerant on the floor, and lit it on fire. Investigators say they were driven to the scene near Lawrence and Birchmount in a white or light-colored hatchback. There's a shortage of truckers here in the GTA and across the country, and it's getting worse, according to new data. The industry says it's costing billions of dollars to the economy. Lorenda Redekop has more on the challenge to attract more young people and women to the job.
Gurtej Pada started driving truck as a part-time job in college.
It was my passion. Like, I used to love driving, so I gave it a shot once I came in, and I never left.
It's been more than 15 years. He now also has other drivers working for him, but he struggles to fill the spots. Industry numbers show a big problem is that there aren't enough young people and women getting into the field.
The reason why young people might not be attracted is mostly, time away from family. A lot of individuals, what they do is when they get older, when the kids grow up, that's when they get into trucking.
A new study found truck driver vacancies have more than doubled since 2016, from 8,600 to more than 20,000. 6.8% of all truck driver positions are vacant. For long-haul truck drivers, it's close to 10%.
Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. They've leveraged our website and used landing pages.
Companies are trying to recruit new workers, also offering signing bonuses in a job that averages more than $67,000 a year. They say the shortage affects everyone.
This means the missed opportunity of roughly $3.1 billion in lost revenues, an injection lost to our Canadian economy and our Canadian workers.
The owner of one small company is offering an incentive, a starting wage of more than $72,000. But he says one challenge seems to be a societal shift, with more younger workers preferring to stay closer to home.
Obviously, you can't work in a truck at your home at the same time, when in other industries you can do a lot of functions out of your home office.
But companies are offering jobs with less time out of town. The industry would like the government to get involved to support them with issues such as immigration and training. Lorenda Redicomp, CBC News, Mississauga.
Still ahead, how a coronavirus outbreak could impact some of Toronto's most vulnerable, the homeless.
I'm extremely worried about this because I know how deadly it could be if it reaches the shelter system. You know, a lot of our folks are quite ill and quite sick as it is right now.
What shelter workers and street nurses are asking the city to do. That's coming up next. Homeless people are considered to be one of the most vulnerable populations in a disease outbreak. Tonight, advocates are calling for the city to take action to keep COVID-19 out of shelters. Nick Boisvert has the story.
So I'm going to read the 7 names that we're adding to the list today.
On the second Tuesday of every month, Toronto's homeless community gathers at this downtown church for a solemn occasion.
All of these women died in January.
Hundreds of names have been read over the years. People who work with this community fear there could be many more to come.
I'm extremely worried about this because I know how deadly it could be if it reaches the shelter system. You know, a lot of our folks are quite ill and quite sick as it is right now.
Advocates say the city's homeless could be the hardest hit by COVID-19 because conditions on the streets and in shelters are no place for an infectious disease.
Shelter users all live together in a crowded space, and so if somebody does get a virus, or the coronavirus in this case, it would spread so quickly.
To prevent that, a group of shelter workers and street nurses are calling for more proactive strategies, including the screening of shelter users, the addition of more beds, and motel rooms for homeless people who need to be quarantined. Last week, the city acknowledged those concerns.
There are infection prevention and control guidelines for those particular centers, and we're enhancing that ongoing regular advice.
In the meantime, shelter volunteers say they're taking some extra precautions to keep themselves and the homeless healthy.
For what we can do, try and, we keep the kitchen very clean. We sanitize all of our utensils, our plates and everything, our cups.
But without more help and funding from the city, volunteers say those efforts can only go so far.
So we're in a hard spot right now, and especially because they're homeless.
Nick Boisvert, CBC News, Toronto.
Keeping people who are without homes safe from a COVID-19 outbreak is also a concern in the U.S., where there are massive numbers of people living on the streets. In some parts of California, they've added hygiene stations and mobile bathrooms at homeless encampments. In San Francisco, they're using 30 RVs to house people who are homeless and have tested positive for COVID-19. In California alone, it's believed there are more than 150,000 people who are homeless. U.S. President Donald Trump will give a primetime address tonight at 9 p.m., outlining America's plan to deal with the coronavirus. The address will take place just hours before the New York suburb of New Rochelle will be turned into a containment zone for 2 weeks. It has seen the largest cluster of cases in the U.S. Stephen D'Souza has more from New Rochelle.
So this is New Rochelle, New York, a suburb of New York City, about 18 kilometers north of the city, where one of the largest cluster of cases is located. And this is where the governor has declared a containment zone, as well as called in the National Guard. The cluster of cases is all the result of one lawyer who went undetected for a number of days and was the first case of community spread. So that led to more than 100 confirmed cases, as well as hundreds more put into voluntary quarantine. Now, the containment zone that the governor declared stretches out for 1 mile in a circle around a synagogue where that first patient attended. Now, speaking to a lot of businesses here, they say people simply aren't showing up. People are afraid to come out and don't want to be in this area. And a lot of the people who are in this area have mixed feelings about the idea of having the National Guard here and declaring this containment zone. Take a listen to what some of them had to say.
I was shocked with the National Guard, but the containment area I'm okay with.
I'm not really concerned about it because I believe that they've already taken enough steps to be able to address the needs of the community.
I mean, it's slow. People are, all the misinformation and disinformation, and then all the hype has just got everybody crazy and nobody knows what to do anymore.
So the National Guard will be here to deliver food, to clean public spaces. People who live in the containment area will be allowed to move in and out, and there won't be checkpoints or anything like that. The governor says that this is in hopes of containing the spread, and so they're actually going to set up a mobile testing lab right in New Rochelle. As well, schools are going to be shut down for the next couple of weeks, affecting more than 5,000 children, all in the hopes of containing the spread and keeping the numbers where they are. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, New Rochelle, New York.
Washington state has been one of the other hard-hit areas in the U.S. At least 29 people have died from COVID-19 there. Today, Seattle announced it is closing all public schools for 2 weeks, and the governor of Washington issued a ban on social gatherings of more than 250 people to slow the virus.
These events that are prohibited are gatherings for social, recreational, spiritual, and other matters, including but not limited to community, civic, public, leisure, faith-based, or sporting events. This is an extremely dangerous event that we are facing. But we are not helpless. We have the ability to seize our own destiny and the safety of our loved ones by acting to do what is necessary and effective in reducing the rate of the spread of this epidemic. There is no magic silver bullet at the moment medically, but there is a very successful effort that we can take to slow the spread of this disease, and that's to reduce the social interactions that are not necessary in our lives.
And the governor had a message for the rest of the country, saying that it will likely be in the same position as his state in a matter of weeks. He hopes Washington state can act as a template for how to slow the virus. San Francisco has also issued a ban on gatherings with more than 1,000 people because of the pandemic. The NBA's Golden State Warriors have confirmed the team will play its home game tomorrow without any fans in the building. And big news from the NCAA. In a tweeted statement, it announced that March Madness games right across the country will also be played without fans. Both the men's and women's tournaments begin next week. Only essential staff and limited family members will be allowed in attendance. There are now more than 12,000 cases of coronavirus in Italy and more than 825 deaths. Since yesterday, the death toll has climbed 31%, and more than 60 million Italians are trying to cope with life under a nationwide lockdown. Italy now says all stores except pharmacies and food markets must close in response to the country's virus outbreak. The government restrictions mean only one member of a family can do the shopping, and in public, people must remain a meter away from each other. The new restrictions begin tomorrow and last 2 weeks. Cruises have become COVID-19 epicenters at sea. Still ahead, we look at how one infected passenger can lead to infection rate 4 times that of Wuhan, China. That's coming up in about 10 minutes. Disgraced movie mogul Harvey Weinstein's sentencing today of 23 years in prison is being called justice and a new day for women. But Weinstein's lawyers call his trial unfair and the sentence obscene. Insiders in the Hollywood film business have since admitted they knew about what they called Weinstein's dreadful behavior, but did nothing. The now 67-year-old will be taken to prison, but his legal team is filing an appeal. Weinstein still has to face another trial in California on yet more sex charges. The impact of the case has been profound right from the beginning. Many saying today's landmark decision will change the way sexual violence cases are dealt with in the future and who speaks up to start them in the first place. Farah Khan is an advocate and educator at Ryerson University who's been addressing sexual violence for 2 decades. She says, while today is a major success, it's no time to be complacent. So when you first found out and you first saw the sentence, what was your kind of gut reaction to what we saw?
Gratitude. I had so much gratitude for the women who came forward. We know that they had to push against ideas that their careers would be ruined, that their families would be ruined, that they themselves would not have a career going forward. And so much gratitude towards those women.
And why was there so much placed on 23 years?
Because it's rare to even get a conviction, let alone a substantial amount of years that the person would go to jail. So it is surprising to see that. I think advocates across the country and across the world are saying this is kind of substantial, what has happened, that it was taken seriously.
So what is this going to mean going forward? I mean, it's one case. Sure, it was a big case, very high profile, tons of people watching, but what is it going to mean for other sexual violence cases going forward?
Well, oftentimes when we see high-profile cases in the media, people will watch really closely to say, okay, if I came forward, can I trust that people would hear me, people would believe me? And so in this case, it may make people more comfortable to say something. The chilling effect actually doesn't cool down. It actually, people feel more comfortable, and that's what we want to see.
A lot of people also will watch today's coverage, they will see this news, and they'll think back to other high-profile cases in America, in Canada as well. Will this kind of change or reframe the way and the lens through which we look at those past cases?
Yeah, I think for me, when people talk about this case being a watershed case, we already had a watershed case in Canada. We had the Gamashi case, which was a huge conversation in Canada around sexual violence, where changes happen legislatively in terms of work and labor legislation, in terms of how we deal with sexual violence, but we still have more to go. And I think that includes funding sexual assault centers from across Canada. We need sustainable funding for that. So hopefully this is a watershed moment to recognize that this is an issue that is not going away. We have to keep working at it and keep funding the services to support survivors.
To that point as well, when we see a case like this and we see so much activism that's gone on behind the scenes just to even get this case to trial, is there fear in your circles around people thinking, okay, we're kind of good, we figured it out, this happened, this big sentence came through, and now they can kind of relax on that activism work?
Well, that's my worry all the time, is that people go, okay, it's done. You know, we dealt with Harvey Weinstein, it's just one person. But the thing is, it's not just one bad apple in the bunch, this is systemic. We need to look at labor legislation. We need to look at the way our companies deal with these issues when they come forward. We need to talk about how judges are trained. And we also need to support survivors when they come forward, be it the social services that they get, and be it their families and communities. People have to know when they come forward that someone will say, I believe you, it's not your fault, and I'm here to support you.
Harvey Weinstein currently has another trial that will go ahead in LA. What happens if it doesn't lead to conviction or perhaps leads to a relatively small sentence? Does that claw back some of the successes that so many people like yourself are calling today?
I don't think it does, because the success is when people come forward and they're seen and believed. And so be it a conviction that happens, or they're seen by their peers or their family or their workplaces as that this is real, this has happened, this is important. And so we have to keep moving forward, and conviction is one part of that conversation, but it's not the only one.
Time now to get Suzanne Leonard back in the conversation. And Suzanne, despite the fact that we had that beautiful weekend last weekend, right now we're kind of more average, hey? This is normal, this
Who
weather?
are you calling average? We've just started working together.
Hey, we are both above average, I will say that for sure.
And we have a superlative audience with us tonight. Absolutely, way above average. No, you're right. We are back to seasonal. We have had a very normal March day, which is to say that it started on the cool side. And now we are around seasonal. We hit a whopping 3, which is, again, normal seasonal for this time of year. But hey, on the plus side, not on the negative side in terms of norms. Also, the winds are fairly light. They rolled in out of the east-southeast, so we've had a bit more cloud cover today. Some of that moisture streaming off Lake Ontario. Satellite and radar. Interesting, we've got some flurries around Parry Sound, around McTier right now. A little bit of lake enhancement with the winds coming across the water. We know what that's all about. If you've ever been caught in a snow squall, which I'm sure you have, any snow topping up our ski hills would be most welcome. And for skiers as well, always great to ski on natural as opposed to artificial snow. But the ski hills are doing their utmost to get things ready for your March break. There is snow coming with this next system, but it will be mainly well to the north of Georgian Bay. We will see some passing showers. Forecast models have pulled back on the amount of precipitation, and that would be mainly through the overnight. The signature of this next low will be that Friday is on the windy side. A very gusty day with sustained winds around 40 kilometers an hour, and gusts could be double that. That's talking about Friday. I want to back it up for just a moment here. While we see a progression of lows and that next low coming in overnight tomorrow, if you're doing some travels for March break, know that there is some significantly colder air coming to parts of the west and some significant snow there as well. Again, great news for ski hills, no doubt. Overnight tonight, no talk of snow. In fact, our temperatures are a bit above average. Cloud cover, bit of increasing cloud cover tomorrow. We will have a mix of sun and cloud, but our winds are going to be strong. We could even see a few pockets of power outages, but I wouldn't count on that. But just always good to be prepared. We're talking a lot about being prepared these days. Winds out of the the west, eventually west-northwest, and our temperatures, well, they're a little bit up and down, but as we look ahead to March break, I want to let you know that we've got some sunshine for both Saturday and for Sunday, and our temperatures seasonal, Chris, average on Saturday, around 5 degrees and 0 with sunshine on Sunday.
All right, so some average temperatures and weather there from the very incredibly above average Suzanne.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. We'll check in with you again in a few minutes.
Thanks.
This weather update is brought to you by Fairmont Le Chateau Frontenac, the best location for your next spring break getaway in Quebec City.
After the break, searching for an alternative to single-use plastics.
It's all natural, right? It's plant-based. It's going to go from the earth back to the earth.
But why compostable doesn't always mean green. That's next. A federal ban on single-use plastics is coming, and many businesses and consumers are already looking for alternatives. But as Tashana Reed explains, plant-based compostable plastics aren't necessarily the greener choice.
They can be made out of corn or sugarcane, cups, cutlery, and takeout containers designed to be tossed in the compost bin instead of the garbage. Here at this restaurant trade show in Toronto, compostable plastic suppliers are at every turn.
It's all natural, right? It's plant-based. It's going to go from the earth back to the earth.
Certified compostable means the product has been lab tested and is proven to break down within 3 months in a commercial composting facility. But certification is voluntary in Canada, and that means some products labeled compostable might not be.
There's two things I think we need to work on. First is getting stuff certified, and second is making sure that for all compostables, there are places where these can be composted.
While some institutions and commercial buildings have contracts with commercial composters, most municipal curbside programs in Canada don't accept compostable plastics in green bins. And they get sent to the landfill, where conditions aren't typically suitable for compostable plastics. This Ontario composting company is one of the few we found in Canada that processes compostable plastics.
A lot of these windrows right now are pushing anywhere from 75 to 78 degrees Celsius.
The company was asked to test compostable products for the National Arts Centre. It took 1 year of testing to find a product that met their standards.
Okay, so what do we see after 1 week?
So after 1 week, you can see inside of here, we've also got some traditional paper plates and things like that in here as well. But here's what that green cutlery looks like. It's very fragile, very breakable. Okay. One of these other sets of forks that are in here, no, they're knives. There's the knife. It's not breaking down at all, but that's marketed as a biodegradable product. Right. As we moved forward then a following week, you can see the green is breaking down very well again. It's further, just a crumbles apart in your hand at this point.
That green cutlery is one of the products the National Arts Center chose for their facility. Only 3 weeks into their 8-week compost cycle, it's significantly broken down compared to the other compostable branded plastics. Finding the right compostable product and getting it to a facility that will process it are still big hurdles in Canada's complex waste management system. Tashana Reid, CBC News, Kingston, Ontario.
I would probably not advise anybody to go on a cruise for the foreseeable future until the situation settles down.
After the break, what makes cruises hotspots for outbreaks of the coronavirus? Stay with us. We'll be back with that story in just a couple minutes. Ottawa has warned Canadians that if you're planning a cruise, skip it and stay on land. Jonathan Gatehouse looks at why cruise ships are especially at risk for spreading the coronavirus.
Today is February 19.
How dangerous was the coronavirus outbreak aboard the Diamond Princess in February? A new study modeling the onboard epidemic reaches some sobering conclusions. It started with a single passenger and quickly ballooned to a rate of infection 4 times that of Wuhan, China. Left unchecked, the study suggests the disease would have eventually touched 79% of those on board, some 2,900 people. However, researchers also say that if everyone had been evacuated from the vessel when the first cases were discovered, the outbreak could have been contained to just 2%, or 76 people. More than 600 people did get sick and 7 have died. The study concludes the key factor was the ship itself. A floating petri dish where people from all over the world spend weeks in tight quarters putting their trust in the cleaning staff and everyone else's hand hygiene.
I would probably not advise anybody to go on a cruise for the foreseeable future until the situation settles down.
Yet the cruise industry says that it's safe, that they're initiating a bunch of new safeguards to make sure that everyone on board is healthy. I mean, that's a mixed message. Who should people believe at this point?
Given what we've already seen in the last few weeks, I think that it's a very difficult standard to meet.
Some experts say the coronavirus crisis points to a need to reimagine the spaces where we work, play, and travel, such as using materials that can better withstand vigorous cleaning.
If I told you that your cruise ship was going to have a vinyl headboard, you might not think that sounds really luxurious, but I assure you there are properties that we can put into vinyl now that allow it to be both comfortable, luxurious, and safe.
The cruise industry is trying to weather the storm, making it easier to cancel and rebook while slashing prices. The question is, what will win out with consumers? The lure of a bargain vacation or warnings from public health officials? Jonathan Gatehouse, CBC News, Toronto.
But why even leave a city that looks this beautiful? We'll have one last check on the weather to see if it's as beautiful as it looks. Coming up next with Suzanne Leonard. We'll be back in just a minute. Suzanne is down with us now, and Suzanne, we just showed that beautiful harbor shot, seeing the city so nicely lit there. Is the weather as beautiful as the skyline looks
Well,
tonight?
it's not swimming weather.
Okay, darn.
Unless you're one of those, winter swimming enthusiasts.
I would do a polar bear dip.
Would you?
Yeah,
I
don't
would
mind.
cheer you on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, not really into that myself. Love swimming in summer weather. The weather this
Not in
evening.
-1.
No, not in -1. Certainly not in -3, but some people go for it. -3 is a little bit above average. 8 degrees is a bit above average. I know you'll enjoy that. I know you'll enjoy that. We're a bit up and down. That's typical at this time of year.
No problem. And that is our show for tonight. Have a great night.